네, 잠시 안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 잠시 후 2021 DMZ 포럼 평화운동 협력 세션 3-4 DMZ 평화지대화에 있어 경기도의 역할과 비전, 국제 지뢰 행동 표준의 적용을 중심으로라는 주제로 세션이 시작될 예정입니다. 내외빈 여러분들께서는 착석해 주시기 바랍니다. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Peace Movement Session 3-4. The roles and vision of the Gyeonggi Province for DMZ as a mine-free international peace zone, application of International Mine Action Standard will begin shortly. We cordially ask all guests to enter the hall and be seated. To minimize interruptions, kindly refrain from using your mobile phones and other electronic devices. 오늘 행사 모든 세션은 동시 통역이 제공됩니다. 한국어는 7번, 영어는 8번입니다. As the official language of our conference is English, simultaneous interpretation service will be provided today to assist your needs. Channel number 7 for Korean and channel number 8 for English. 네, 코로나19 확산 방지를 위해 저희 2021 DMZ 포럼 관계자 전원은 방역 소독을 완료했습니다. 그리고 정부에서 권고하는 모든 지침 사항들을 준수해 안심하고 행사에 참여하실 수 있도록 모든 노력을 다하고 있습니다. DMZ Forum 2021 staff will make every effort to ensure that everyone can participate in the forum safely by following the guidelines recommended by the government and authorities to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Thank you. 네, 잠시 5분 후에 행사 시작하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
2021 DMZ Forum, Peace Movement Session 3-4, welcome. I would like to thank everyone tuning in through YouTube since yesterday. Let me say hello first. My name is Kwon Hyun-jung, the MC for today's event. 2021 DMZ Forum is being held under the theme of Opening a New Horizon. Today is day 2, and beyond the Korean Peninsula and towards Northeast Asia, we are discussing how to promote peace. Before we begin the event, I would like to invite Professor Kwon Gu-sun, today's chair.
Good morning, distinguished speakers, panelists, and participants who are joining the session through online. It is my great privilege to be here today. I am Gu-sun Kwon, professor at Seoul Cyber University. We will now begin the opening ceremony of the Peace Cooperation Session 3-4. First of all, let me introduce the moderators, speakers, and discussants of the session. The first, Mr. Mikhail Bold, Director of Operation of the Mines Advisory Group, will preside the session. We invited the 3 experts from international organizations and academia for speakers. First speaker is Ms. Abigail Hartley, Chief of Policy, Advocacy, Donor Relations, and Outreach at the UN Mine Action Services. She will make a video presentation. Second speaker is Mr. Varun Kumnova, Chief of Mine Action Program at the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining. Mr. Kumnova is now joining the session by online from Geneva. And I am the third speaker. Next, let me introduce the discussant. The first discussant is Mr. Sang Bom Shin, Director of Security Technology Development at the Korea Institute of Science and Technology, KIST. He was Major General of Korean Army and former senior member of the UN Command Military Armistice Commission. Second discussant is Mr. Hee-jin Lee, Director of the Center for Industry Convergence and Standardization and Professor of the Graduate School of International Studies at Yonsei University. The final discussant is Dr. Jae-guk Cho, Coordinator of the Korea Campaign to Ban Landmines and Chairman of the Sorim Educational Foundation. Actually, Dr. Cho has played a key role in victim assistance and advocacy of mine action past more than 24 years. This session is cordially collaborated by the Mines Advisory Group, the renowned INGO, which has devoted to mine action past more than 3 decades. Now, Mr. Darren Cormack, Chief Executive Officer of MAG, will deliver the opening remarks.
Distinguished delegates, participants, and partakers, greetings to one and all. It gives me immense warmth and great pleasure to grace all of your presence in the interest of disarmament, human security, and peace on the Korean Peninsula. My name is Darren Cormack, and I'm the CEO of MAG, the Mines Advisory Group. I'm sorry I can't be with you. Having traveled previously to the peninsula on many occasions, I would love to be with you. MAG is an expert organization working to reduce the impact of mines, cluster munitions, and other explosive remnants of war. Since 1989, MAG has worked and conducted assessment missions in over 70 conflict-affected countries or regions, directly supporting communities at risk from the threat of explosive hazards. Every year, we help over 1 million people in Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, and Europe. We help people to rebuild their lives and livelihoods after war. MAG has assisted effective communities in Southeast Asia and South Asia for nearly 20 years. In Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar, and Sri Lanka, MAG employs 3,000 incredibly talented national staff, 30% of whom are women. Though perhaps not always prominently reflected in news coverage of contemporary violent conflicts, mine action remains to be a topic of great relevance. Despite long-running efforts to reach a world free of mines, such weapons, including cluster munitions and other explosive remnants of war, continue to present considerable harm to many people in conflict-affected countries. In both the medium and long term, mines and explosive remnants of war block the development of infrastructure. They limit the access to healthcare for people, limit access to education and other social support services. They also prevent the use of sustainable livelihoods, such as water sources, land, and other investments for economic development. Consequently, it is reasonable to expect that the effects of mines and ERW would come up regularly in mediation processes. The connection seems imperative, all the more so as large parts of conflict have come to end over the last 30 years involve mediation, where mine action was used as a predominant tool in the development of peaceful solutions to conflict. For example, in Colombia, Cyprus, Sudan, Cambodia, and Myanmar. The International Mine Action Standards provides an essential framework to ensure that land is returned to communities in a safe and as efficient way as possible to the highest of standards. The COVID-19 pandemic has changed every aspect of life and the work as we know it. We're all focused on how to protect and support our families, employees, and the communities we continue to serve in this unfolding crisis. With the vast majority of MAG programs now fully operational, we can see the positive changes in our outputs. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all of you sincerely committed to make this event a success. This event would not be possible without the support of each of you, everyone presenting and participating online. I would also like to thank my colleagues from UNMAS and the Geneva International Centre for Humanitarian Demining for working in participation with MAG at this event. Finally, I would like to congratulate Gyeonggi Province Governor Lee Jae-myung and Vice Governor for Peace Lee Jae-jang for the role and vision of the Gyeonggi Province for the DMZ as a mine-free international peace zone. I am very honoured to hand over the plaque of appreciation to Vice Governor Lee for hosting this meaningful session and for welcoming MAG for this event. Many thanks for all of your support and your attention today.
Thank you, Mr. Darren Comic. In addition to this forum, the Gyeonggi Province to the ODA for Peace and Development. Funded by the province, the online training workshop for capacity building on integrative management and coordination of National Mine Action Authority in the Mekong region from 31st of May to 6th of June, organized by Mines Advisory Group and Seoul Cyber University. Before we invite Vice Governor for Peace for the congratulatory remarks, please watch a thematic video presentation of the forum.
잠시 숨을 죽이고 귀 기울여 보세요. 무슨 소리가 들리시나요? 가만히 집중하고
Please focus on feel all of this. This sound is exactly for this moment from the DMZ. A long time ago, there's different sound in the DMZ. A lot of arms using, and in 1953, all things were stopped in that place. This is a prohibited area, the DMZ. All the sounds were gone and only silence was remained. However, that is not the end. It was not forgotten. So from this moment in the DMZ, once again, the sound of livelihood, we can listen. Small but invigorated. Its livelihood sound. The sound is far-reaching across the world. From the DMZ, we can listen to the sound of peace. For the new future, this is the entry point of our future. Overcoming the war threats and painful histories, overcoming the dividedness. We are studying a new history of peace. This is the land of peace, the DMZ. Please listen to the sound of DMZ. DMZ will made into a new peace zone.
By Gyeonggi Province. So may I invite Mr. Jae-gang Lee, Vice Governor for Peace, to the floor to deliver congratulatory remarks. Please welcome Vice Governor for Peace with a round of applause.
안녕하십니까.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lee Jae-jung. In terms of the DMZ's role, in order to search for the application of the Mind Action Standard, I'd like to congratulate all of you from other parts of the world. I'd like to express gratitude to many participants from around the world. And thank for the presentation by all the presenters. Abigail Hartley and Balon Kumnova and Professor Kwon Gu-sun and all the participants for our discussion, Mr. Shin Sang-bom and Lee Hee-jin Professor and Professor Cho Jae-guk. I express my deepest gratitude to all of you. And despite the impossibility of the participation right here, but I express my gratitude to the participants online. It's already been over 60 years of the end of the Korean War. However, there are still a lot of pains. And one of the evidence for our pain is the remaining mines and contamination zones because of the mines in the DMZ. There are 122.53 square kilometers contaminating zones with mines in South Korea. Comparing with South Korea, in North Korea, there are also some mines less than South Korea. So still there are remaining mines. So that is threatening the lives of the people residing nearby. So UXOs and mines, if they are exploded, then the residents will suffer from all the pains from them. So because of the danger and risk caused by mines, from 1988, UN mine action activities started to eliminate all the pains. So the governments from around the world and many other international organizations participated in this effort. As a result, we are supporting victims of mines and we are supporting the socio-economic rehabilitation from the pains and the sufferings of mines. So, and in order to build peace, particularly in Mekong Basin countries, including Vietnam, we are supporting those countries. And with the policies of our local governments, we are supporting Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Those Mekong Basin countries are supported by the Korean government. And we are providing some comprehensive activities, measures for them. So today, in this peace movement session, we are considering the common issue relating to mine action. So we will discuss this issue in this point. And in order to reinforce our mine action, I think this this event has a very deep meaning for us. And according to the international mine action standards, we'd like to search what we can do for the future related to mine action, and how can we preemptively act on for the removal of mines across the world. So I think this is a meaningful event, and after considering all the discussion topics at this event, we will make effort to make the DMZ into the peace zone, and we will make a lot of efforts from that moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Governor. To express sincere gratitude to support of the Gyeonggi Province, Mr. Michael Bold will present the plaque of appreciation to the Vice Governor. Would you please, Vice Governor Lee and Mr. Michael Bold, onto the podium. We hereby present Mr. Lee Jae-gang, Vice Governor for Peace, Gyeonggi Provincial Government, Republic of Korea, in recognition for your dedicated determination and commitment for a landmine-free Korea. MAC's mission is to save lives and build a safe future, and we are honored to have been considered as a partner to support your aspiration. 22nd May 2021, Darren Cormack, Chief Executive Officer of Mines Advisor Group.
네,
2021 DMZ Forum, Peace Movement Session 3-4. You're here with us. We are now preparing the stage for the next part of our session. In the meantime, we would like to watch a video together of DMZ Forum 2021, and after that, we will continue with our session. Thank you.
잠시 숨을 죽이고 귀 기울여 보세요. 무슨 소리가 들리시나요? 가만히 집중하고 느껴보세요. 이 소리는 바로 지금 이 순간 DMZ의 소리입니다. 아주 오래전 이곳의 소리는 달랐습니다. 총성과 신음으로 물든 척박한 땅, 그리고 1953년 7월 27일 모든 것이 멈췄습니다. 금지된 땅, DMZ에선 소리가 사라지고 오직 침묵만이 남았습니다. 하지만 그것은 끝이 아니었습니다. 모두의 기억 속에서 잊혀진 줄 알았던 그곳에서 이제 다시 생명의 소리가 들려옵니다. 작지만 힘차게 새 생명이 움트는 소리. 세상을 향해 더 멀리 더 크게 울려 퍼지는 생명의 소리. 이곳에서 평화의 소리가 들립니다. 새로운 미래로 나아가는 새로운 출발점. 전쟁과 아픔을 넘어 분단과 단절을 넘어 새로운 평화의 역사가 시작되는 곳, 평화의 땅. DMZ의 소리에 귀 기울여 주세요. DMZ가 새로운 평화의 지평을 엽니다.
오케이요. 잠깐 쉬었다 갈게요. 아우, 눈 아파. 이렇게 눈에 힘 주는 것도 힘들어. 뭐 좀 평화스러운 역 좀 주면 안 돼, 이제? 응? 나 착한 사람인 거 알잖아.
어떤 역할 해보고 싶으신데요?
글쎄, 이런 역할은 어떨까? 언제나처럼 토론에 불이 붙은 날, 선수 입장.
아이 선배님, 요즘 같은 시대에 누가 그런 데서 올드하게.
들어봐. 같은 시간 콘서트를 하고 있는 남자가 있지. 음악에 평화를 담는 사람인 거야.
그래서요?
그런데 이 둘이 마주친다고. 운명적으로다가. 알았어, 이건 뺄게. 평화의 수호자들이 어느 순간 서로를 발견하는 거지. DMZ 걷기 딱 좋은 날씨네. DMZ 포럼, DMZ 콘서트, DMZ 아트 프로젝트, DMZ 런, DMZ 평화 예술제, 다시 평화.
그게 뭔데요? 영화예요? 아 선배님 개인 방송 하시게요?
야,
선배님 저희 다시 촬영 들어간대요. 선배님 눈에 힘 빡 부탁드려요. 선배 화이팅!
야, 나 뭐 쉬...
You are watching Peace Movement Session 3 of 2021 DMZ Forum. From now on, we would like to start our session on the roles and vision of the Gyeonggi Province for DMZ as a mine-free international peace zone, application of International Mine Action Standard. Now, I would like to hand over the mic to Mr. Michael Bold, Technical Director, Mine Advisory Group.
Very much everyone for inviting the Mines Advisory Group to this extinguished event, and also to be able to sit up here on the panel with very extinguished dignitaries here in Korea. And I would like to start this session by watching the message from Abigail Hartley from UNMAS in New York.
My name is Abigail Hartley, and I'm the Chief of Policy and Advocacy for the United Nations Mine Action Service. I'm delighted to join this event, even by video, to talk about the role of mine action in peace building. I'll talk about the impact of explosive ordnance, mine action in the UN, mine action in peace building, before concluding with a number of case studies. Despite 164 signatories of the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention, 57 states and 3 other territories are still contaminated by anti-personnel mines. Following a period of steady decline in casualty numbers, in the early 2000s, high numbers of casualties have been recorded in recent years as a result of countries facing intense armed conflict and the large-scale use of improvised explosive devices by non-state armed groups. 66% of 2020 casualties were civilians. Men and boys remain the most affected by the explosive ordnance, with 41% of casualties being men and 12% being boys. The highest casualty figures were recorded in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan and Somalia. The majority of casualties were due to IEDs. Although UNMAS is located within the Department of Peace Operations, we are mandated by the General Assembly to coordinate mine action across the entire United Nations system, supporting both peace operations and humanitarian interventions. In addition to the small team in New York, we have a humanitarian hub in Geneva and some 3,000 women and men employed through 19 unmasked programs in the field and throughout the world. Our work spans the entire mine action area of work, called the 5 pillars, which are clearance, risk education, victim assistance, advocacy, and stockpile destruction. In addition, UNMAS coordinates the IECG, 12 UN entities engaged in mine action. Mine action has a very visible and immediate impact in conflict situations, making it an excellent entry point for peace-building activities. It can be a topic of discussion during peace negotiations or mediation, allowing parties to agree on areas that garner support with their constituencies, given landmines affect everybody equally, whichever side of the fence they sit in the conflict. Mine action can also be a local level confidence building measure. As land is cleared, people return home, gaining confidence in the peace process. By improving overall safety and security, mine action fosters relations between local populations and governments, strengthening peace processes. Clearance of explosive ordnance and supporting weapons and ammunition management helps to prevent further conflict by curbing illicit access to or transfer of weapons. Mine action enables humanitarian and development objectives. The clearing of contaminated land enables freedom of movement, including for peacekeepers and humanitarian actors, and socio-economic recovery through access to agricultural land and markets, basic services and infrastructure. Allow me to share some case studies, starting with Colombia. During the peace negotiations in Colombia, mine action was included in the 2016 peace accord between the government and the FARC. Rural development and land reform were a central part of the peace negotiations, so technical advice and agreement on contamination and clearance was essential as part of the negotiations and implementations of the accord, allowing communities to once more make use of their land. Moreover, FARC ex-combatants were trained in mine action activities. To date, over 100 former fighters have been trained, supporting their socio-economic reintegration and strengthening their belief in the peace process. Another example is Cyprus, where demining was used as a concrete offering to relaunch dialogue between the Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot leaders towards the implementation of a final settlement agreement in 2015. The reopening of additional crossing points has allowed thousands of community members from both Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot communities to cross the buffer zone safely to visit family, friends, religious sites, and to engage in trade across the border. UNMAS also provides technical advice and training to the Committee on Missing Persons to facilitate safe access to sites where the committee conducts its activities. This contributes to reconciliation between communities by enabling relatives of missing persons to recover the remains of their loved ones, to arrange for a proper burial, and close a long period of anguish and uncertainty. Sudan's eastern states had faced extended conflict between the Sudan People's Liberation Movement and the government of Sudan until 2006, when the Eastern Sudan Peace Agreement was signed. The continued peace has been attributed in part to the opportunities granted due to mine action efforts. For example, the removal of mines in ERW facilitated dialogue between conflicting tribes and economic recovery, including the reopening of the market in Amiet, Abyei, which was central to the local community. The government of Sudan has acknowledged the key contribution of mine action on several occasions, including in intersessional meetings of the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention. UNMAS is exploring opportunities to replicate this success in South Kordofan and Blue Nile states, where armed conflicts are still ongoing. Cambodia's northwest border with Thailand is heavily mined for a length of some 740 kilometres, and mines have killed or maimed over 64,000 Cambodians. UNDP Mine Action supports Cambodia with rehabilitation, education, vocational training and job opportunities, contributing to reconciliation and sustained peace. Over 1,600 square kilometres of contaminated land has been cleared and over 3,000 survivors have received assistance. Cambodia is demonstrating commitment to upholding peace and showing effective governance, building public confidence. In Myanmar, Mine Action is contributing to local conflict resolution despite ongoing armed conflict and other challenges to the peace in the country at large. UNICEF Mine Action has assisted in the setting up of mine risk working groups at national and state levels, bringing together ministries, the National Army and NGOs. These forums present unique and valuable opportunities for advocacy and engagement for protection, including of children and the peace processes. I will conclude my presentation here. I do hope I've shown clearly the significant contribution Mine Action can bring to peacemaking, peace building and peace sustainment. There is no doubt Mine Action plays a key role in promoting peace. I leave you with the words of UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. Peace without mine action is incomplete peace. I thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for that message from UNMAS in New York. And I would like to invite the second speaker, Mr. Valan Kumana, Chief of Mine Action Program at Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, for his remarks.
Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to the organizers for organizing this important event and for inviting GACHD to deliver a presentation. I'm really sorry I can't be there with you today, but I send you my warm greetings from Geneva, and I'm delighted that I'm able to attend this event and support you from afar. Over the next few minutes, I would like to talk about the legislation and the governance in mine action and some of the good practices that exist out there. I've prepared a presentation which I will share a screen for now in hope that you can follow it. Michael, may I check, please, whether you can see the slides?
Yes, we can see them.
Thank you very much for confirming that.
You're welcome.
So, affected countries have over the years worked very hard to address the issue of the efficiency and effectiveness as much as possible, learning many lessons along the way. The lessons are typically captured in international mine action standards, which are a unique feature of mine action, and once transformed into national mine action standards, guide operations work in the field. For example, the lessons help identify and recommend institutional architecture for mine action captured in the International Mine Action Standards 210. The GICHD supported some of the work to produce the standards for Korea last year, and we were delighted to engage in that work. To better understand the actual principles of mine action, it is important to define the term. The term mine action programs refers to a group of mine action projects managed by a central agency such as the National Mine Action Authority, supported by a National Mine Action Center. When we speak about mine action, it is very important to understand that this refers to the mine action arena connecting to the various fora. So the mine action arena connecting to the government arenas, community arenas, international arenas, and of course, the market arenas and the business sector. A National Mine Action Authority is, as defined under the IMAS 210, is responsible for the broad strategic and policy decision related to mine action, whilst the Mine Action Center is responsible for the day-to-day management and in some cases for the implementation of mine action projects. It is important that going back to the role of the National Mine Action Authorities and the centers, it is important to to understand these distinct roles. The National Mine Action Authorities are responsible for broad strategic and policy decisions related to mine action in countries, for example, for the design and the oversight of implementation of mine action legislation, reporting on the progress made to mine action, as a government overseeing the work of the Mine Action Center, advising the government on the mine action matters, and so on and so forth. Whilst the Mine Action Center's responsibilities are as a body to coordinate mine action at an operational level, the Mine Action Centers normally are responsible to perform the following tasks: implementation of mine action plans, accrediting mine action operators, monitoring and reporting on mine action activities, and so on and so forth. I produced this table really to try and depict that across the globe, in many affected states, there are sort of, let's call them three potential options. There is the textbook solution of National Mine Action Authority, National Mine Action Center and operators, which exists in places like Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia. And the key success factors of this model is that it provides an adequate provision for National Mine Action Authority Secretariat. It's got multi-operators that foster competition, and it's got a donor coordination plus significant national funding. The second model combines the National Mine Action Authority Secretariat and the National Mine Action Center. And this model is applied in places like Cambodia, Laos, PDR, Vietnam, Thailand, Lebanon, and many of the UN-managed programs, such as Afghanistan. This model promotes a strong National Mine Action Center, including secretariat functions. It fosters multiple operators, and it fosters good donor coordination. And then the combined National Mine Action Center and operator model, which is typically applied in places like Azerbaijan and Ethiopia, which has an active National Mine Action Authority that sets high performance targets for the Mine Action Center, but it does not promote independent operators. So obviously there are many ways that the different mine action authorities are set up. Allow me to use one case study from Cambodia. The Cambodian Mine Action Authority and Victim Assistance Authority, established under Royal Decree number 177 on 6th of September 2000, is mandated to regulate, monitor and coordinate the mine action sector in Cambodia. CMAA is under the direct leadership of the Prime Minister and the CMAA Vice President, while the CMAA Secretary General manages operations related to its mandate. The structure of the CMAA is as follows. Of course, there may be different applications for Republic of Korea, and on the paper that was distributed by the organizers, the structure actually is depicted in terms of architecture for that mine action center. The case study number 2 is from Lebanon, where the Lebanon Mine Action Authority's legislative body established in 1990 by the Lebanese Council of Ministers to enhance and facilitate coordination among different ministries in matters relating to mine action. The Mine Action Center is a part of Lebanese Armed Forces, and it executes and coordinates the Lebanese National Mine Action Program on behalf of the Lebanon Mine Action Authority. Therefore, this Mine Action Center operates within the Ministry of Defense and reports directly to the Air Force. The structure of the Lebanon Mine Action Center is very much similar to that in Cambodia, and it's depicted on this slide. My final 2 slides really are just a remark of potentially reminding you as an audience of the life cycle of the mine action. The GICHD has done some analysis in terms of both resources required and also the different phases of the mine action programs out there, and they're depicted on this slide. Obviously, with greater engagement, and as the phases move towards priority recognition, assisted development, that's where there is an improvement on an increase on a national ownership until it gets to a phase where mine action actually becomes reactive. So in conclusion, mine action is very well positioned to play an important role in Republic of Korea. The combined National Mine Action Authority Secretariat and National Mine Action Sector model, i.e. Model 2 that I presented earlier, that exists in Cambodia and Laos PDR, as well as in Vietnam and Lebanon, could be the most appropriate for Korea. The GICHD will remain ready and available to support the Republic of Korea as it establishes its mine action governance and architecture. And of course, we would like to continue our support beyond the work that we did on standards. I thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Valen, for this excellent presentation. And before we continue here, this is also a live event. Could we just do a 1-minute presentation of all the panelists here to refresh the audience, our names, and also how we are involved in mine action today?
Thank you, Chair. I'm very honored to have an opportunity to make a presentation of this meaningful session. The topic that I'm going to present is kind of a comparative analysis of the legal framework and governance structure of national mine action actors in Mekong region and its implication to mine action in Korea. As you know, both Korea and the countries in the Mekong region have some share a history of the tragedy from armed conflict, so-called the proxy war in the Cold War era. Both violence conflict left scars of war in the form of explosive ordnance, such as landmine and unexploded ordnance. The diagram shows the size of lands and contaminated by mine, cluster munition, and other explosive ordnance in the sub-region of the Mekong region. Recently, the Lao government reported all of 18 provinces were contaminated by UXOs, which used to be the 15 provinces. And mines have been found in Vietnam. Mines have been founded in 63 provinces in Vietnam and 15 provinces in the central zone were recorded as heavily contaminated areas. As the Vice Governor mentioned, South Korea has approximately 112 square kilometer minefield that are assumed in bearing 380,000 to 1 million landmines. But actually, nobody knows how many mines has buried in DMZ and other area. The past decades, the rear aerial defense areas have been surveyed and cleared, but 3,000 anti-personnel mines are still unaccounted for. Compared to a huge number of victims in the Mekong region, Korea has less victims, but still 608. But currently, peace sharing movement survey the victims of UXO is amounted to more than 5,000 victims newly founded as victims of unexploded ordnance. When the President Moon delivered the keynote speech at 674th session of the United Nations General Assembly, September 2019, he proposed that DMZ, a symbol of the last Cold War, should be turned into the mine-free international peace zone. 2 months later, the Korean government hosted the first Mekong-Korea summit in Busan and pledged Korea-Mekong Future Peace Community Program, including the clearance of ERWs, explosive remnants of war, support victims and rural development and protection of the environment. These initiatives, in particular the Peace Village program that Korean government has committed, provided a major opportunity for institutionalization of mine action here in Korea. Let me just briefly introduce the Peace Village program in the Mekong region. One of the Korea's key foreign policy is a new Southern policy, of which vision is Korea-ASEAN community share the future of people-centric community of peace and prosperity. The third pillar is to establish a stable region that is peaceful and secure. In addition, Korea and Vietnam, Korea has had successful experiences in rural development program in Cambodia, Laos, PDR, and Vietnam. The more importantly, Korea also shared the common challenge of mine and UXO contamination. So in this regard, the mine action program that combines peace and development was implemented. The strategy is the rural community to be free from the threat of mines and UXOs, so victims and their family rights to be protected and transform contaminated land into land of peace and prosperity in sub-region of the Mekong, which ultimately contributed to achieve sustainable development goals, including National Sustainable Development Goals 18. Actually, they mentioned free from threat of mines and UXOs. There are some main approaches of the Future Peace Village program, but let me point it out. The third approach is mutual learning through sharing best practices among the CLMV, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam, and Korea, and also through the effective knowledge management. At present, humanitarian demining has been conducted in multi-buy aid program in cooperation with the UNDP, and victims' rights, such as the establishment of a rehabilitation center and sustainable rural development project, are planned in a bilateral cooperation between Korea and Vietnam, and Korea and Cambodia, and Korea and Laos PDR. Now let me compare the legal framework and governance in Cambodia, Laos, PDR, and Vietnam. With regard to signing and ratification of international treaties, and Cambodia ratified CCW, Convention on Certain Conventional Weapon, Protocol 124, and MBT, but not a party to CCM. And while Laos PDR, which mainly suffered from the UXO of the cluster munition, ratified the CCM, not a party to MBT. The Vietnam signed the CCW, but not yet ratified, didn't accede CCM and MBT. However, they all ratified the CRPD, Convention on Right of Persons with Disability. But in case of Korea, it is a high contracting party to CCW and ratified Protocol 2, prohibition or restriction on use of mines, booby traps, and other devices, while not binding to CCM and MBT. Regarding the domestic law, National Mine Action Standard and relevant strategy and plan, the Cambodia and Vietnam legislated act on ban landmine and or the clearance of mines and UXOs, while 3 countries adopted a legal framework of National Mine Action Standard, National Mine Action Actor, National Mine Action Standard and strategy and plan, while the Korea has the acts on ban landmine, but no legal framework of the clearance and national mine action actors. As Mr. Varon Kumnova explained, 3 countries established a governance of mine action from policy to implementation level, including external mine action actors and operators. At present, Ministry of National Defense of Korea takes a full responsibility for mine action, and there is no space for civilian engagement. Let me draw your attention to mine action in a provincial level, because as a Gyeonggi province is the main theme of this DMZ Forum. Actually, the level of a provincial government engagement varies from country to country. When I visited Battambang and the Pailin provinces, Cambodia, for feasibility study mission commissioned by Korea International Cooperation Agency, it was quite impressive that the province established Mine Action Committee and Mine Action the planning unit to make a participatory decision on prioritization of survey and clearance, and play a bridging role between central national mine action actor and the local community. And Lao PDL has the decree that prescribes governance of mine action in provincial and district level, participated by Department of Labor and Social Welfare, the Foreign Affairs, and Provincial Commander of Lao People's Army. So there is the very good the best practice in Quang province in Vietnam that has the legacy of War Coordination Center, which is authorized to plan provincial mine action and solicit multi-actor consultation, including external actors for survey and clearance. But Korea doesn't have permanent and well-established governance in a provincial level. So let me elicit an implication of a CLV, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar cases for the context of Korea. The Korean Peninsula is the only place in the world where the ideological conflict still exists, which makes the South and North Korea prevent both from acceding relevant international treaties such as MBT. Though South Korea has some acts related to regulation of the use and transfer of conventional weapons, including mines, they don't prescribe mine clearance, no civilian engagement is allowed, while full responsibility of mine action goes to Ministry of National Defense. Meanwhile, according to the Joint Chief of Staff of the Korean Army, 305 landmines were found in 2020, last year. And as I mentioned, the 3,000 mines, anti-personnel landmines, haven't been found and cleared in rear area defense areas. KBCL, that represented by Dr. Chae-guk Cho, is estimate that there are approximately 200 suspicious hazardous area, we call the SHAs. It shows that the comprehensive legal framework should be established, as the CLV countries have done. The Korean mine action has biased military demining that has abandoned other components. To mutually inclusive mine action, Korea needs a governance participated by public, private, and military actors. To some extent, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam established National Mine Action Authority, whose mission is to implement 5 components of mine action, and Cambodia and Laos PDR adopted civilian control for mine action. In Korean context, domestic mine action and ODA program for mine action has been fragmented. So when I work with the Korean International Cooperation Agency, the bilateral aid agency, and they don't actually share the information and achievement and performance with the Ministry of National Defense. And National Defense actually only focus on domestic mine action and not considering seriously about the mine action in overseas countries. So those two actors are fragmented and didn't have some substantial communication between both actors. Related to the previous implication, coordination and cooperation between civil and military actors should be promoted. The Korean military has committed considerable financial resources and mobilized reliable and well-disciplined forces, but the performance remains unsatisfactory. For example, since a decade, about $18 million has been spent to clear 3,700 mines in UXO, with repeated demining without proper land release and no specific planning of completion. Of course, it resulted from the institutional problem, but it will be improved by comparative advantage between civil and military actors. In order to do that, qualified civilian actors should be cultivated and more encouraged to participate in mine action. Gyeonggi Province has its jurisdiction near the central DMZ and some minefield in rear air defense areas, which makes the province become an important stakeholder in the framework of Korean mine action. Referring to the cases of Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, Gyeonggi Province should consider interdepartmental committee and implementation system in the provincial level so that it may coordinate potential actors for effective mine action program in near future. Let me conclude my presentation. It is reported that MND, Ministry of National Defense, has been drafting the act on clearance of mines and other explosive ordinances. However, the concerns in academia and civil societies are raised in that narrow and minimalist approach should be applied. There is a saying that all roads lead to Rome. The Korean contextualized act and governance structure should lead to IMAS, International Mine Action Standard. The further cases of Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam are still relevant, so policy and decision makers should refer these cases in the process of legislation. As Abigail Hartley mentioned, peace without the mine action is an incomplete peace. So on the road to peace and prosperity of the Korean Peninsula, the mine action is the precondition to achieve the peace and prosperity of Korean Peninsula. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kwon. I would like to continue here and invite our panelists here, and we could start with Professor Cho. You'll be so kind.
Sorry. I am Jae-guk Cho, who is a professor, former professor of Yonsei University, and now I am a chairperson of the board meeting of the directors at Chang'an University. During 24 years, I have worked for the mine victims and the mine clearance in South Korea. As going to the United States to cooperate cooperate with the international society. In this time, I'd like to talk about application of international mine action standard to the Korean mine action. As you know, the Korean mine clearance is deeply related with American Army in Korea in combined operation. The United States already announced to ban landmines to comply with the all obligation of the Ottawa Mine Ban Treaty, including anti-tank mine ban. However, they said not to accede to the Ottawa Mine Ban Treaty due to the role of them to in combining operation in South Korean Army. Someday, I hope we can accede to Ottawa Mine Ban Treaty with United States and North Korea simultaneously. However, Korean President Moon Jae-in reported in the United Nations Assembly the plan of mine clearance in the DMZ 2 years ago. At the time, he stressed to need the cooperation with international society as appointed the name of the United Nations Mine Action Service. In other side, the Ministry of International Affairs and Trade reported the Korean mine action would be taken as international mine action standard regulation on the annual report of CCW to United Nations. The Ministry of National Defense translated international mine action standard in Korean last year and announced the plan to accept international mine action organizations for mine clearance in the DMZ. Actually, I have translated international mine action standard in Korean last year to reported it to the Ministry of the National Defense of Korean government. In Korean situation, the non-technical survey, according to the International Mine Action Standard, the mine action composed of non-technical survey, technical survey, social environmental impact survey, mine clearance, mine land release, monitoring, and victim assistance, etc. In Korean situation, the non-technical survey is the most important factor in mine action because mine-related documents mostly belong to the United States Army, which withdrew from Korea in 90s. Also, the community liaison is an important factor because most mine lands are private lands belong to the civilian residents. Therefore, all plans of mine action must be prepared with community reflection about the process, including clearance method, land release, and land usage, etc. Overall, the headquarters of mine action control must belong in the Prime Minister as international mine action standard regulation to cooperate with various fields in the government. As Mr. Kumano, GICHD, mentioned. Secondly, I'd like to comment on the draft of mine action by the Ministry of the National Defense of Korean government. They said about the necessary under the military control and operation of the Joint Chief of Staff, civilian sectors can involve mine action. They must have two conditions. First is the expert, and second is the process of the law. Even so, mostly 80% of minefields in South Korea have no any military necessity. The Korean Army intends to occupy the mined private lands in the name of minefields or mine clearance. The Ministry of National Defense needs to release all of unconfirmed minefields. This is the 80% of all of the minefields in South Korea to non-military sectors such as local governments, Ministry of the Interior and Safety. Also, they must give up the over legal occupation of the civilian lands because 90% of the minefields belong to the civilian lands. Second, the draft said organizations of the action about organizations of the action. As Mr. Kumano, CICHD mentioned, the Ministry of the National Defense is the chair, including 20 members. He said, okay. The draft said the Ministry of the National Defense is the chair, including 20 members, and the Ministry of the National Defense set up the Mine Action Center for the plan and the implementation. For Mine Action Plan with community reflection, the headquarters of Mine Actions Control must be belong to the Prime Minister, as International Mine Action Standards Regulation to cooperate with various fields in the government. That's same as the Mr. Kumano mentioned. Third is that basic plan of mine action, the draft said they planned every 5 years make a new plan. The draft said the Ministry of National Defense drafts annual plan of mine action such as work plan, survey, management of mine clearance and information system. However, the National Mine Action Plan must be made generally as a perfect plan by cooperation with military, civilian, governmental, national, and international stakeholders. The non-technical survey would be performed, and the system of the information must be applied with International Mine Action Standard Regulation. And the draft said MND cannot accept land release even after mine clearance due to approximately remained mines. In South Korea, there are so many rare areas minefields beside of the DMZ. Mostly the Ministry of the National Defense made the sign of the pest mine zone. Pest mine zone is illegal sign. It is just non-mine clearance. The Ministry of National Defense must accept the system of the quality management of the mine clearance developed by United Nations Mine Action Service. Lastly, the draft said that the Ministry of National Defense can give the consignment of mine action of the NGOs under the control of the Ministry of the National Defense. I think for acceptance of the international NGOs, various ministries such as Ministry of the International Affairs and Trade must support to the various fields in order to accept international NGOs such as MAG, GICHD, and Hello Trust, and other sectors. So all of the ministries of the Korean government tried to accept international mine action organizations, but the Ministry of the National Defense have no any experience to communicate with the international mine action sectors and mine action organizations. So always I said that I urge that Prime Minister can control all of the mine actions in South Korea. I'd like to say to all of Korean people and the international society, please remember, we have really so many victims of the mine and UXO. Nowadays, our organizations, the KCBL, Korean Band-to-Man Landmines, are taking survey UXO victims. This is the first time to investigate UXO unexploded ordnance victims in South Korea. I was very surprised because 5,300 UXO victims are there in South Korea after the Korean War. But Korean people and the Korean government don't know about that. We didn't care of them after the Korean War. Even so, Korean government are tried to support other victims in Asian countries and the African countries. Last year, 305 rounds of the landmines are floored in the river from the minefield. That was very, very dangerous to the civilian people. They have no any protection. This is the Korean situation. For peace, for protect of the Korean people, we have to clear the mine and we have to accept international mine action organizations and exports. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor. And we will continue on the thematic of this discussion. And we are focusing on mine action for peace, governance and inclusion, international convention, and also international mine action standards. And I would like to invite Professor Hae-Jin Lee from the Yonsei University to deliver his remarks. And we are running a little bit late, so if we can try and time it around 5 minutes. Sorry for that, sir.
Okay, thank you. I will go very quickly. Thank you for the insightful presentations. And my special thanks go to Gyeonggi-do and Lee Jae-gang Vice Governor for Peace for organizing this very important session. As you see my profile, my main area of expertise is standards. So my first question and comment come from that perspective. Standard and standardization play a very important role, not only in industrial and economic sectors, but also in social domains. Standards bring consistency and thereby enhance efficiency and effectiveness. I think the same applies to this field of mine action. Adopting and abiding by IMAS, International Mine Action Standard, helps make mine action practices consistent, safe, efficient, and effective wherever they are taking place. Having said that, standard and standardization often faces challenging questions like how to secure diversity while standardizing. So it can be translated into the question of globalization and localization, etc. So in this context, I'd like to ask a question to the three presenters. Isn't there any question or problem in applying the International Mine Action Standard in Korea? That is, can we just adopt and use them in Korea, specifically speaking in DMZ? Or do we need, or can we customize to make it fit in with the different mine-related circumstances in Korea? We need to take the IMAS, but there must be differences. So how to manage those things? And my second question, the Professor Kwon and the other presenters and the discussant as well indicated the integrated governance among the civic, the public, and the military. It sounds necessary and relevant, but my question is related to the first question, which is the local differences. However, mine-related issues have been managed, controlled, and governed by the military in Korea for a very long time. So, is the integrated governance feasible or realistic in Korea, particularly where, technically speaking, the war is not yet over? And furthermore, as this forum and this session are being run by Gyeonggi-do, I'd like to ask the question, what would be the legitimacy or legal status of the local government like Gyeonggi-do as regards mine action? So I have a couple of other questions, but I'd like to make it short. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. And well said on standards and the fear of not being inclusive when you apply a repetitive process. But I would like to maybe Mr. Wallen from GISHD to answer the question about IMAS adaptability into local context, since you have a very distinguished section working with your standards at the center. Mr. Wallen.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you very much, Professor, for that question. I mean, indeed, it is important to understand that the International Mine Action Standards, as they are guidelines that provide good and best practice in terms of how mine action should be conducted. They become a legal framework once a country adopts them into national mine action standards. And they become a legal framework because then there are accreditation processes that follow and so on and so forth. So it's absolutely paramount that the national mine action standards are developed to the context that it applies. And it is often the case that the international mine action standards have to be adjusted to the context, but the international mine action standards normally serve as the basis to actually allow for development of those national standards that actually then are enshrined into a law and become a legal obligation and a legal framework. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much, Valon. And I do believe, being an international organization, a non-profit organization applying international mine action standards, national mine action standards that we then develop standard operating procedures for, I would say the past 10 years have seen a change in IMAS, which definitely pushes for diversity, inclusion. It's not only operators, it's mine victims, gender and diversity in mine action. So it has been a quite big shift in the international mine action standards for the past decade, I would say. Anyone else in the panel here that would like to comment on the questions from Professor, or should I just hand over?
Okay, just a quick answer to Professor Lee's second question about the military role in the Korean mine action. It is definitely, we cannot deny the role of the military as the mine action perspective, because they have implemented for a long time, actually dominate mine action program. But I think it's kind of a procedure approach, not totally transform interagency, the coordination or cooperation mechanism, but we can kind of divide the role and responsibility among five components of mine actors. And also in technical side, I think a non-technical survey is more accustomed to civilian experts that can participate in this non-technical survey to interview, observation. Those kind of documented screening can be done in the civilian sector as well. And also, in Cambodian case, there are some division of labor between civilian and military actor. For example, military actually take a responsibility to peacekeeping mission, mine clearance in overseas mission, but domestic is controlled by the civilian sector. So we can discuss civilian and the military actor to communicate which comparative advantage should be defined, who will play the role, or other partner play the role. It needs a time to discussion, and so some procedure approach should be applied to Korean context. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. I would like to...
네, 감사합니다. 또 저는 신상범 단장님을 이제 모시겠습니다. Hello. I'd like to thank all the participants. I'm in charge of developing security technology. When North and South leaders met in 2018, at that time, the two leaders make three promises. First one is about DMZ, making DMZ into a peace zone, and second one is the West Sea will made into the peace sea, and third one is the military summit between the two in order to build confidence between the two. So for the implementation of those promises, we made the agreements. We adopted. At that time, I was the representative of the UN military, and as the part of the implementation in Panmunjom, we eliminated the mines in the Panmunjom area, and LOL area in order to find some bones. We had the operation related to mine removal, and we built the roads around that area. As a result, our capabilities and North Korea's capabilities, if they are combined, and then we can find what kind of abilities of each side has. And all the presenters said that by applying IMAS, how can we remove mines, and how can the IMAS can be applied to the Korean situation related to those issues. If the system is not applied to Korea yet, which is disadvantage, and it is limited to use civilian abilities still. That is because of South and North Korean issues and other international issues. It is unpredictable for us. That is the fact. Nevertheless, we have a very well-trained military personnel, and then we have the reserve military. So by utilizing all those human resources, and then also we have some very academics who making great efforts in such fields. If we can utilize those capabilities combined, then I think we can resolve this mine removal issue. I think the ideal option is by applying the IMAS and then under the cooperation with various domestic as well as international organizations, then we can create the DMZ into the peace zone, and we can signal the end of the war in the Korean Peninsula. And for the north side, they can be supported some resources and materials. And also, as well in South Korea, we can use the DMZ as the symbol of peace, and based on such symbol, we can build upon a lot more great things. To this end, centering with the Defense Ministry and along with government, based on the cooperation of ministries and government agencies, it would not be easy to implement such plan. However, Mr. Lee Hae-gang earlier mentioned some local governments with the capabilities like in Gyeonggi-do, if take some lead in this mission, then I think better achievements can be reserved. And also with the cooperation with the Defense Ministry, we can achieve better results. Last but not least, I would like to great gratitude have some questions to Mr. Professor Cho. I heard that you did the translation of the IMAS. Then, in terms of the government or in the context of Gyeonggi-do, what kind of help you need? And Professor Kwon said that there is a need of the cooperation between military and civilian. Then, who would be in charge of the major role? And then, from UNMAS, from the UN related to North Korea to remove landmines in North Korea or on the Korean Peninsula. Is there any efforts of the UN to remove all the mines in North Korea?
When there was just a video presentation, so UNMAS would not be able to answer that question. And maybe Valon, discussions with UNMAS. Have you discussed North Korea and potential support intervention?
Yes, thank you, Michael. Not to a degree or an extent. I mean, certainly from our perspective when we worked very closely with all actors in the Korean Peninsula under the project to develop the International Mine Action Standards for Korea, which Professor Cho was referring to. We worked under the auspices and very closely with the German government and German embassy, who had the leading role to liaise with obviously both sides, Republic of Korea and North Korea. So we haven't had any direct contact, but of course we have a very different mandate to the United Nations. We're non-governmental organizations, so we haven't really had explicit discussions with the UN on this.
Thank you, Mr. Wallon. Professor Kwon, you had maybe an answer to the questions?
I think the Gyeonggi province have so many issues and so many roles to be taken for the mine clearance, especially for the non-technical survey. Non-technical survey is most important for the mine clearance. Can be taken by the civilian experts and the local government. For example, this is the mine map in South Korean mine field. I have several materials of the mine map. If we can find this kind of mine map from the United States Pentagon archive or the library or other areas, we can very greatly cost down for mine clearance. However, as a civilian, ordinary civilian expert, I have this kind of materials, but Korean Army and the Ministry of the National Defense have no any this kind of materials because they did not any non-technical survey and they have no any concept about the non-technical survey. I think local government promote this kind of survey and research. They can give a very big role to mine clearance and solve the mine actions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kwon?
All I can say that the golden rule is the civilian control and the governance of mine action. But how to apply this golden rule to Korean context is the question. So as Major General Shin mentioned, we have many veterans of the very competent and well-trained veterans of officers and non-commissioned officers. They can definitely play a key role in mine action area. And other perspective is many civilian actors who are interested in this area also should be cultivated. So it's a big challenge that we have at the moment, how would we balance between civil and military participation in the mine action. That is that we have to figure out in the near future to establish mine action governance in Korea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. I've been told to kind of put some final closing remarks and round this section up, and I would like to thank you, everyone that participated here, and from the discussions we can conclude, and we have to conclude, that landmines and ERW is a national problem. Hence, it requires a national response and a national solution to it. It is also important to emphasize on inclusion, and that is for all stakeholders that will benefit from land being released that has previously been contaminated. And I would also like to conclude that the International Mine Action Standards have been in place for more than 20 years. They are inclusive, they give guidelines, and those should be used to establish the national standards. It's key to have national standards, and for any stakeholder, either providing clearance support or services, there are some key chapters that needs to be addressed, and that applies also to the civilian industry. We need to look at risk management. How do we manage risk? Information management, methods to release land that has been contaminated, quality management system to make sure that we can show that we have put all reasonable effort forward to say it's good now, to hand it over to the stakeholders. So I would like to finish off there, and thank you very much for inviting Mines Advisory Group to this panel, and in particular being the moderator of this. So thank you very much to everyone.
네, 이렇게 해서 평화운동
So this concludes Peace Movement Session 3-4, and I would like to thank the moderator as well as the presenters and discussants for their valuable insights. COVID-19 has hindered our daily lives, but I hope that new spring will return to our daily lives. And that was the wish that we had when preparing for this session. And this concludes our session. And to all those joining through YouTube, I would like to say thank you.